We are now on page 11, Daf Yud Aleph of the Talmud tractate of Sotah, the 10th day of our study. And we continue in the Agadata, in the various stories that come out in this part of the tractate of Sotah. In the Mishnah we said, B'chein linyan Atoy and Miriam, that just like that God gives punishment commensurate to your action, so too he gives reward commensurate to the action. And then he brings a proof from Miriam. So Miriam waited for her brother when he was put into the Nile. Moshe, when he was put into a basket, she waited for a little while. But when she had leprosy in the desert, the Jewish people waited for 7 days. So the question the Talmud asks is, how could you say exactly commensurate as it is in the negative, so it is in the positive, but it's not so because it was 7 times as much. So basically, he says that he's telling us it's commensurate, but much more. So in the negative, it's only measure for measure. But in the positive, you get much, much more in reward than than your action that you had done. Then we talk about Miriam. So it says that that she stood. His sister, Moses' sister, when he was put into the basket in the Nile River, she stood there from a distance, ladas, to know mayosle, what will happen to him. So the Talmud tells us that every one of the words of this verse refers to God. That God was with her at that time, and everything that was happening was straight from God to be able to save Moshe Rabbeinu. Then we go to talk about Egypt. We talk about the king of Egypt. So it says Vayakam Melech Chadash, because we're talking about Moses in the water. So obviously, who put him in the water? It's because of the king's decree. So it says there was a new king. So there's an argument in the Talmud between Rav and Shmuel. One says that there was a new king. The old king died, and there was a new king. So obviously, he had new rules and laws and new relationships, and he wasn't beholden to any old relationships. But one of them says that he wasn't a new king, but just he created a new term, a new era, and he started to change his decrees and his rules. So according to the one who says it wasn't a new king, why would we say that? Because it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that the king died and a new king reigned. So he said it was just a king that changed his rules. If it was a king that changed his rules, how can we say Ashaliyadas Yosef, he didn't know Joseph? If it was the same king that was in the time of Joseph, they obviously knew Joseph. That means that he all of a sudden acted as if he never knew who Joseph was, even Joseph, though, was such an important part of his rule. Then we see it says that he said to his nation, "Hear the Jewish people." So he's the one who led his people into enslaving the Jews. So the Torah tells us because he's the one who began the process of slavery, therefore when Hashem had smitten the Egyptians, he was the one who was hit first. As Hashem told through Moshe, B'cha, to you and Amcha and your nation, Chalavdech and all your servants, you will be punished. Havan is Chak Maloi. So Paroi told his people, let us understand and be smart in how we deal with this growing minority of Jewish people. So why does it say let's outsmart him? We're talking about the nation of people, many people. So why does it say him, individual? So Paroi wasn't just dealing with the people. He knew that these people belonged to a God. Even though he didn't believe in a God, he knew they belonged to a God. And there's a God who protects them. He said, how do we stand up to this God? So let's look in history. So one thing we know is that God punishes by fire. So if we burn the people in some way, God will punish us. He'll take revenge. Then we know that God punishes with sword. So if we kill them by sword, God will punish us. So then they figured out, let's punish them by water. We'll tell they have to put their children into the Nile River, into the water. Because God already promised to Noah that he will not destroy the world with a mabul, with a flood. So he will not destroy the world with water. But what they didn't realize is that God promised to Noah that he will not destroy the entire world with water. But one nation he will destroy with water, as he actually did. And also, God said he will not bring water to destroy people. But to bring people into the water, like what happened to the Egyptians, that is something that can happen. And ultimately, the Egyptians punished the Jewish people first by trying to kill them through putting the babies in the water. And how did they meet their final end? That they were drowned in the water in the sea. Now, when Paroi was talking about let's outsmart these people and figure out how to overcome them, there were three people who he called in as his advisory board. One was Bilam, the famous Gentile prophet. One was Eov, Job, and Yisro. Bilam is the one who suggested the Paroi enslave them. Eov was quiet, and Yisro ran away. He said, the Jewish people are good and I can't be a part of this. And they were judged and commensurate with their opinions. Bilam was killed at the hands of the Jewish people. Eov lived a life of pain and suffering because you can't be silent. Silence is almost supporting the negative side. And Yisro, who fought for the Jewish people and ran away not to be part of what was going on, his great-great-grandchildren, his descendants, were leading Torah scholars in the Lishkas Hagazis, in the area where the Sanhedrin sat in the Beis Hamikdash in the temple. To them, Pari said, they will fight against us and they will leave the land. So the Gemara asks, they should say, will throw us out of the land. I mean, if at the end of the day they create a rebellion against Pari and they leave Egypt, that'll be better for Pari. At least they won't have a group of people trying to overthrow him. So why is he complaining? So actually, he means Ve'alinu. He means that they will chase us out of Egypt. But Pari was talking like people that they are cursing themselves, but they sort of express it in a way of cursing their friend. Then it says that they placed upon the Jewish people taskmasters. So why does it say they placed on him a taskmaster? So actually, the word taskmaster, misim, is also from the word that of what Paroi actually did. What Paroi did was that he took a mold, a brick mold, and he hung it around his neck, and he went to make bricks. And then they told the Jewish people, we want you to join us. The Jewish people say, we don't carry bricks around us. We're not day laborers and these type of laborers. So they would say, really, are you more of a careful person and careful how you walk around than Pari? Pari's walking around. So by Sima love, they placed on Pari's neck, and through this they got all the Jewish people to place on their necks and get the idea of slavery started. Sorry, Misim, what is the idea of these molds? He says, so Paroi placed these molds and wanted to get the Jewish people building so he can afflict them with their hard work. But Anoisa means to afflict him, not them. So the truth is, Hashem is saying that the harder you made the Jews work, the greater the affliction and the punishment that came to you. Then it says they built, but even out in Miskas Sapphire, they built cities of storage for Paroi. What's the idea of miskanais? So there's two opinions, Rav and Shmuel. One says that it endangers their people because if you're building tall buildings, many people can die. So it endangers the people who are involved in it. And one says that it impoverishes, that you spend so much money, it impoverishes you. And as it's brought down as saying that whoever makes big buildings, at least in those days, became impoverished. They built cities called Pisim and Ramses. What's the Pisim and Ramses? The Rav Shmuel again, one says its real name was Pisim. Why is it called Ramses? That every building, as they were middle of building it, it wasn't built very well and it fell apart. The other one says the real name of the city was Ramses. Why was it called Pisim? Because there was quicksand there, and as they built the building, it became a little heavy, it just got swallowed in the ground. So they were never really built a full building. It was constantly falling apart at some point. Then it says in the verse that the more he afflicted the Jewish people, so they will multiply, and so they will grow great in numbers. It should say the more you afflict them, the more they did multiply. Why did it say they will? So we're telling us that the Torah is actually saying, it's sort of saying a prophecy that that's what will happen. Paro thought he was going to afflict them, so they don't have time and ability to build families. But Hashem said the opposite will happen. The more you afflict them, the more they will become larger people, have bigger families. By Kutzim, they became disgusted with the Jewish people, that the Jewish people became like thorns in their eyes. Every time they saw us, we were like thorns in their eyes. Then it says that they worked the Jewish people befarach, very, very harsh. So Rabbi Lazar says befarach means befarach. That initially, how did they get the Jewish people to work? They convinced them this is a national service, it's a good thing, to volunteer, to help. Rabbi Shmuel says no. From the start, it was with difficulty. They forced them into hard work. Then it says that they embittered their lives with difficult work and with bricks and mortar. So Rava says that first there were bricks and mortar, and then they made the work do everything. So they started with one thing, and then they placed them much greater hardships. All of the work that they made them work difficultly. So here we say, what was the difficult work? It's the second time it says the word befarach, difficult. So here they made the women do men's work and men do women's work, which is a work that they're not used to. So they made it much more difficult and harsh. So even though at the beginning, some people say that he convinced them in a nice way to get involved and it wasn't difficult. But here, by this point, everyone agrees that it was very difficult work. Rabbi Vira says that in the merit of the righteous women in that generation, the Jewish people left Egypt. Why is that? Because the Jewish women used to go and draw water. When they drew water, Hashem made all of them very successful, that they would draw water with many fish. And they would then go home and they would take two pots and they would put the water in one pot to put up a boiling hot water. Another pot, they cooked the fish. Then they would go out to their husbands that were out in the field working very hard. And they used to wash their feet and their bodies. And they used to then anoint them with some oils. They made them feel like a human again. And they used to feed them well and give them to drink. And that way they convinced their husbands who were really tired from working and almost giving up to say, let's have families and let's be together. And they used to cohabitate out in the fields, obviously in private. And then the Jewish people, because of continuity and even in the hardship of the continuity, they were merited to take all the great wealth of the Egyptians later. But basically, when the women went home and they became pregnant, when it came time to give birth, they would go out into the field under the apple orchards, and Hashem would send from heaven angels, would help them give birth, and at that point, they would bring two. They would bring two stones. Hashem made a miracle, two stones. One was with oil, and one was with honey. And this is what they ate. The babies drank from. When the Egyptians came to the fields to try to kill these children, Hashem made a miracle that they were swallowed up in the ground. And then they brought all types of farm equipment to try to cut down the fields and kill them as well. But it didn't help, obviously. And then they grew under the ground in open space miraculously. And then when they grew a little bit older and they were able to go out themselves, Hashem made them come out of the fields like plants come out of the fields. And they would all come back to the cities. And this way, the numbers grew miraculously under the eyes of the Egyptians. And therefore, it says when the Jewish people crossed the sea, the children, those who were young, recognized Hashem first, because Hashem took care of them from when they were born until they were able to walk and get out and be part of the Jewish people and part of the work. Then it says that the king of Egypt told to the Jewish midwives. The Rav and Shmuel said, who were these midwives? Some say it was Yocheved and Miriam, the mother and daughter, Moses' mother, Moses' sister. And some say it was mother and daughter-in-law, which is Yocheved and Elisheva, the wife of Aaron. But most people agree it was Yocheved and Miriam, and their name was Shifra and Pua. The Shifra means Yocheved used to straighten out the child when the child was born, like midwives do. Or Shifra means that the Jewish people multiplied incredibly during her times. And Pua is Miriam, Pua because she used to whisper to calm down the child when they grew up, when they came out crying. Or Pua means that she is the one who spoke and told her father that my parents are going to give birth to the Redeemer of the Jewish people, and convince the parents to get married again, and through them having Moshe Rabbeinu being born. Now, Paro told the midwives that when you give birth to the children, he gave them some instructions. And he says, you'll see on the stones. What does it mean on the stones? So he gave them he taught them some science. He taught them like this, that when a woman gives birth, her thighs become as hard as stone, as stiff as stone. So the baby can come out. Or others say that just like a worker who has his thigh on one side of the bench, thigh on the other, then in the middle he has this piece of his hard piece of wood that he works on to create stuff. So also that's where the child comes out from. Then he says, if it's a boy, you will kill him. So what do you mean if it's a boy, you will kill him? He didn't just say if it's a boy, you'll kill him. He told them, how do you know if it's a boy? Because a boy is born face down and a girl is born face up. Now it says that the midwives feared Hashem and they didn't do what he spoke with them. So really it should say what he spoke to them. So we're told that actually Parai wanted to have relationships with these two women, Yocheved and Miriam, but they resisted, just like Sarah resisted, and the great-great-great-grandmother, the first Jew, resisted as well to the Pharaoh at that time. But Chayanas Ha'iladim, we're told that they kept the children alive. Not only didn't they help kill the children, but they actually did everything to give them, the parents, whatever they needed to keep the children alive. Then when Pari saw that his command wasn't working, so he called them in and he says, "What's going on?" So they answered back, that our women, the Jewish women, are not like the Egyptian women, because they're like the animals. What does it mean? If it means that they are like midwives, well, midwives also need midwives to give birth to them. So when they were saying, listen, the women take care of themselves, they don't need us. They never called us to help give birth. But if it means that the Jewish women are midwives also need midwives to give birth to their children. But they actually said that the Jewish women, the Jewish people are compared to the animals, as we find that half of the sons of Jacob were blessed to be like animals. Judah was blessed to be like a lion. Dan is like a snake. Naphtali is like a deer. Yisachar is like a donkey. Yosef is like an ox. Benjamin is like a wolf. And even the ones that doesn't say specifically what they are, it says all of them are like lions to a certain extent. He said just like the animals don't have any help, the Jewish women are like the animals of the field. They don't have any help. Now it says that when the Jewish, when these midwives, they had the fear of Hashem and they didn't help Pharaoh carry out his decree, and they actually helped the Jewish women give birth, the Yaslam but them, God gave them reward. He built them houses. What are houses? So Rav and Shmuel, again, the same two people talk. One says it refers to the house of the priesthood and the Levites, which is Moshe and Aaron. Aaron was the priest, Moshe was the Levite. And one says the house of kingship. The one who says the house of kingship, who could be referring to? It refers to King David, because King David came from Miriam. Because Miriam was married to Kaleb ben Yefunah, who was from the tribe of Judah, and King David comes from him. Who was Miriam married to? So we're just going to talk a little bit, end off this page. Miriam was married to Kaleb ben Yefunah, but really his name was Kaleb ben Chetzroin, and it says he gave birth to Azuva. Azuva means the person who everyone abandoned. Who is this referring to? So really, we're referring to Miriam. Miriam is called Azuva because she was abandoned, because she was actually very sick, and no one wanted to marry her. If she was sick, her face was like green. But Kalev saw she came from a holy family, and he married her because he believed she's a good woman. So he married her for the right reasons. It says whoever marries a woman for the right reasons has many, many blessings. But more importantly, it says if he gave birth, he gave a new life to the person. Now, it was called Chetzer. Why do we call him Yefunah? So he turned away. Yefunah is from the language, meaning he turned away from the conspiracy that the Meraglim, the spies, made when he went with the spies. Him and Joshua, the 10 other spies, him and Joshua turned away from their plan, which they brought back, was to talk bad about Israel and to discourage the Jewish people from taking over Israel. And that's what we find that even his children are referring to the strength of Kaleb. Yashar, that he made himself straight, that he followed in the path that Moshe sent him when he went to Israel for the Meraglim, for this to spy the land, to scout the land. Shoivav, that he captured his Yetzer Hara, who was pushing very much that he should follow the other 10, and he didn't follow him. Ardon Sharadas Yitzre, that he controlled his Yetzer Hara. And as well, we find that his name is Ashur, referred to Ashur because his face became black from all the fasts that he fasted that he shouldn't be caught into. So it's a very difficult challenge when you're with 12 great people and 10 of them are leading in one direction, which he knew was wrong, but not to follow them. And this is the great thing. So Avi is also called Avi because he became like a father to, like we said before, like he gave birth to because he took care of her. But also Takua, he was anchored because he was anchored incredibly in heart and soul to his father in heaven. And it says that at the beginning we said that Miriam was sick, but then through her marriage and everything, she became healed. She became beautiful, and she became beautiful to the point that all of a sudden everyone looked at her and they were jealous of Kaleb, that he had such a beautiful woman inside and out. And this was the story of Miriam and the end of today's page.